It's not a bird, it's not a plane, it's Superhero Slate. It's a modern podcast where we talk about everything that's great, like movies, TV, superheroes. It's Superhero Slate, oh yeah.
Hello everyone and welcome to Superhero Slate, the show where we run down the latest superhero entertainment news.
We love TV, movies, and superheroes, so let's talk it all out.
My name is Chris Dillard.
And my name is Mike Royer.
And welcome to the official Superhero Slate review of Avatar, The Way of Water.
Yes, and I'd like to hope people listen to podcasts and listen to us over the last 9 years because we're real people with real lives who, love to go to the movie theaters and then kind of come here once a week and download our thoughts out onto the internet. But as that's being said, we are real people, and I just had like an exhausting
Mike
2
is
hours.
not bringing his A game on this, is what he's trying to say. And it's not his. It's no one's fault. He's had some trials and tribulations here.
Yeah, she was just it's a bit of a home improvement nightmare for 2 hours, and I kept pushing off the podcast. I was like, Chris, I'll be ready at 4. I was like, give me 20 more minutes. I think I need 10 more minutes, and then eventually I ended up giving you like an indeterminate amount of time. I was like, I don't know. This is a video of what I'm doing. You use your best judgment to determine how long it's going to take me to get on the microphone. With that being said, all of my work ended up being a disaster, and it didn't work, and I had to scrap it. And there's nothing worse than like cleaning up after a project and it just didn't work because you have nothing to show for all the dust that you're sweeping. That being said, I feel like I'm geared up right now. Like I got a lot of ire behind me, but we kind of already let the
Well, I think you're making
the lid slip of what kind of how we feel about the movie yesterday when we recorded the news.
I think you are making a great segue into this Avatar review because originally, and we've talked about this on the show, our regular Superhero Slate news podcast, that James Cameron originally wrote a treatment for the second movie and scrapped it. Has nothing to show for it, Mike. So I think, much like James Cameron, you are much like him today in what he did with the original Avatar 2 script.
I love that. I will channel that, and hopefully the second attempt at this project will turn out to be in high resolution IMAX screen quality in my garage.
When you do it, I want it to be in 3D, and I don't want the newest 3D. I don't want passive 3D, Mike. I want the red and blue stuff. So whatever you do, make sure it's in red and blue, so we can see it coming right at us here. But yeah, so we have both watched Avatar: The Way of Water. Again, as we talked about on our regular show, I am sitting on this from opening weekend. You are from this weekend. And I will say there was a legendary, I guess, quote-unquote, box office for this movie this weekend because it had a 0% drop from week 2 to 3 in box office returns.
That's impressive. You don't get that headline often.
Yeah, especially, they were comparing about Spider-Man, I think No Way Home, which was last year, and it had a pretty significant drop after the holidays, but, at the same time, I don't know how many people are going back to rewatch Avatar: The Way of Water, but a lot of people are going the first time, and as we talked about, it seems like it's going to have some legs to it, right? When you have a 0% drop in week 3, it's probably going to continue for a couple more weeks. And the only competition I know, and I didn't think it had any, but there's that Megan movie with the creepy doll coming out soon, so I don't think that'll eat into it. I think it's a different audience, but I think we can probably go all the way up to February, riding that number 1 slot for a while.
Yeah, and you sent me a great chart from the website The Numbers, which tracks the first movie alongside of the sequel of Way of Water, and it's just a domestic chart, right? So I don't have the worldwide comparison on here, but it shows that the sequel is trending day to day above the original Avatar. Now there is a toggle on this website which will turn on like the actual inflation adjusted, and if you do that, it's running like neck and neck. It's almost performing identical to the original Avatar. But that being said, no one out there is ever going to report actual inflation adjusted numbers. Like the studio is never going to do that, and the blogs and other websites are never going to do that as well. And all movies are like that. So it's important to note that as these box office numbers are reported, they're never going to include inflation unless you kind of go to like a niche news website or podcast where they're really analyzing the numbers. So if you were to look at the domestic numbers as of right now, Way of Water is overperforming. Now, I don't know about the international numbers, and also I believe Chinese New Year is coming up soon.
It's like February. It's not any time. I think within the next month, though.
Well, it's big enough to look out for, right?
Yeah.
Because that is a huge, very long holiday compared to just like one day or one weekend here in the United States where like the whole country is going to be on vacation. So I don't know if Way of Water is going to be something that they want to go to, or if it's going to be maybe, more of a domestic Chinese release that they would prefer to see, because I know a lot of domestic Chinese movies save their release for Chinese New Year. So it still has more money in front of it. It seems to have legs, as they like to say. So I think this whole narrative that was being formed that this movie is going to underperform and, the Na'vi are dead out there in the pop culture did not end up happening.
Well, and I think as with any sequel, I think it also, you don't have to reintroduce a world, right? And I think this movie doesn't. It actually, I think, does a poor job reintroducing us to this world with a couple things, and we'll talk about that when we get into it. But like, people already know what it is, right? We don't need to understand what Pandora, or is it the RDA? Is that the name of the agency who's coming for them?
I think so. I think a theme of this
RDA,
review is that I don't remember names of organizations or people.
Yeah.
I have like I literally Googled Way of Water characters, and Google has like this nice little thumbnail search return of pictures and names, because I don't know them. This is a new this is a new language here to us Earth people, and we'll see how I struggle with that.
Yeah, and I guess the thing is also with that, there is very little RDA in this movie, right? I think like the humans take a backseat to the two cultural differences of the Na'vi, right? There's the jungle / tree Na'vi, the what I will call the Earth Nation Na'vi, and the Water Nation Na'vi, who honestly, I mean, look cool as hell. I think that's really fun. For this. But the other thing I think is, I'm just going to go ahead and throw this out there, movies of original IPs such as Avatar, not based on anything other than an idea James Cameron had, this is fantastic news, right, for original IP movies. Like everything else, like we're always talking about Marvel movies, DC movies, adaptations, this is great for original content, and that's something we just don't get to see a lot these days. It's something new and fresh from the idea of a filmmaker. So
we never quite got we never got a sequel to things like Jupiter Ascending. I'm just trying to think of just
I think that was an adaptation as well, but like,
was it? Okay, never mind then.
Yeah, well, I mean, but like, I think that we haven't had something like this since maybe Star Wars, right? Like, in terms of numbers, I don't think. Again, I go to the store and I check the toy aisles. I don't see a lot of Avatar toys out there. That doesn't mean there's not, but I don't think it's also like, there's the secondary market, the residuals for like action figures and stuff like that, it just must not be there for this, but they don't need it when they're literally just selling a movie going experience. And that is something that we can, jump into here, is our movie going experience for this, right? Like you said, we love to go to the theater. We love the whole vibe, even though I know you hate the smell of jalapenos, like the open jar of jalapenos. You if you went there and didn't have it, I know you'd probably be a little disappointed if you're like, well, they took jalapenos out of the theaters, because that's part of it, right? All the goods, the bads, we've had it, the whole thing. And I would say this is probably one of the better, less bothersome movie going experiences I've had in a while. At the end of the day, right? To watch the movie and not have people on their phones or like talking or interrupting for the whole movie, and that was really cool.
Yeah, on that, I would say this does feel like a moment, right? As compared to, we get Marvel movies 2 or 3 times a year now, and they're very, it seems like your mom, your grandma, all the kids come out to this one. I'm not saying that's not necessarily happening with Avatar. It actually factually has to happen in order for it to get these box office numbers. But it seems like almost people are just like, okay, this is something unique happening here that only comes along like every 12 years it seems to. So yeah, I would say the same thing. My theater had like this vibe of just like, okay, we're ready for this. This is more special than anything else we'd see in the movie theater.
Yeah, and to kind of cap off what I talked about yesterday, I was actually lucky enough to be in Florida, Orlando, and go to one of 13 AMC theaters that have a laser projector. So I did not have the IMAX experience. I did not do 3D because I can't do it very well. I'm legally blind in one eye, and 3D doesn't sit well with me. But they do have heated seats, and they will deliver food right to your seat for you if you order it at the concession stand, so you don't have to wait in line for everything.
Nice.
To make everything. So that was really fun. I will say the laser projector could not tell you a difference between that and my home theater projector, if I'm going to be honest at the end of the day. I think there was nothing special that stood out that made me feel like I'm watching something different from a projector. So if you ever have the opportunity, I can't say I recommend it. I don't think it's an extra cost, but like if you want to check it out, I think you're going to be underwhelmed by laser and AMC at the end of the day.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, what is a laser except for light? So
Yeah.
that is basically a projector.
Yeah.
So I don't even know what the benefit is to a laser projector. It almost seems like it would be like either the longevity of the device or possibly maybe the length of projection. Like maybe you could set the projector back further. So it seems like to the audience, it's just kind of like a branding type of thing to give it a little extra zhuzh.
Well, the lasers, they have different lightings. Lasers is more like an HDR kind of thing, right, for projectors, because other ones are bulb powered, right? So you just have the lumens of a bulb. With laser, you can control the light more because it's not just one bulb coming out. You have multiple like beams coming out of this thing, kind of like, again, at Disney, how they light up the castles, right, with the laser projectors, so they can control it better. So you're supposed to get like more like higher or brighter brights, darker darks, and all this crystal clear stuff, but I couldn't tell it got any difference at the end of the day. So thankfully it was not an extra premium, but I'm glad to say I did it. Heated seats made it nice for 3 hours and 15 minutes. And whatever, how I think we had like 30 minutes of trailers before the movie started too. I don't know about you, but like I was in that theater for a long time that day, waiting for this movie to start and watch it. But overall, fun time. And you saw it. You don't normally go to the IMAX, where you went, right? So this was a rarity for you.
I have a feeling that I saw the movie as James Cameron intended. I was at a 3D IMAX screen, like an actual true IMAX. Well, I guess there's lots of different definitions of IMAX, right? I always assume IMAX in my brain is I go to the Natural History Museum and they're doing the 3D showing of like Everest or whatever, and you're looking at like a gigantic dome, like at one of those big dome ceilings. That's what IMAX is to me, but it stopped being that a long time ago, and now it's just kind of like a really, really tall 4x3 screen. So I believe I saw it as the director wanted me to, and I picked pretty decent seats because the last time I was in this theater is when I saw Infinity War, and I was a little too close to the screen than I wanted to be and a little off to the side, so I was like smack dab in the middle of the audience, both vertical and horizontal, so I felt like my seats were really, really good. But man, these IMAX screens, they stuff you in there like sardines. Like once everybody is settled in your row, God give you strength if you decide to exit that row to use the bathroom, which I don't know how you sit down for, with the trailers, almost 4 hours probably without needing to use the bathroom at least once. You pretty much should plan as this being the only thing that you do all day, and it's the first thing that you do. Don't consume any matter or fluids if you want to watch this movie in a proper IMAX screen, because I had to get up once and everybody hated me because like depending on how tall you are, it doesn't matter how much you like pull your knees back, you like physically have to stand up to let me through. So that was the only thing that kind of sucked, is that I was really, really stressed planning when I was going to interrupt everybody in the theater so I could go use the bathroom. And then you got to do it all over again when you come back in. So I tried to go to the bathroom as quick as possible. So it's like ripping off a Band-Aid so these people wouldn't get too settled back into the movie. So that being said, this theater looked beautiful. I guess we can go ahead and maybe start dropping our spoiler-free review here of Avatar: The Way of Water. And for me, it was an absolutely beautiful experience. I've never visually seen a better-looking movie. And I'm including like the best-looking Star Wars movies, the best like Avengers or even like DC movies out there. Like visually, this thing is just every frame has like love and care and attention poured into it. And I think that's special in a way, because most of the time I'm somebody that comes from the point of view that like story is everything. It doesn't matter how bad your movie looks. You could be working off of an indie budget, right? But as long as your story's good, I will overlook anything bad because I'm having a good time engrossed in the story. This is almost the opposite in a way of James Cameron gave me visually the best looking thing I've ever seen in my entire life on the screen. And then the story just ends up being, okay. I thought I was more entertained and immersed than I was in the first one. So I think that's good. That's good progress. But like, man, you kind of think you would get used to it, right? After being in the theater for over 3 hours, that you would just kind of get numb to the 3D, to the dimensions on the screen, to the fidelity of the characters. But man, like every new action set piece, every new location just reinvigorates like just the absolute like thrill you're having watching this movie. So yeah, I think when we jump into spoilers, we'll kind of split this review up into like the technology visual side of things, and we'll also talk about the story a little bit separately. But they got so many different things going on here: the 3 dimensions, the high fidelity of the CGI, the different frame rates, which I don't know, Chris, I don't know about you, but was it ever advertised to you? Did you ever see anything? I never saw anything. I had no idea there was going to be an alteration to the frame rates in any different scenes of this movie. So when it happened at first, I was like, whoa, what the hell's going on here? I was not prepared for this. I've never done this before, right? I never went and saw the Peter Jackson Hobbits and was it 40 frames per second or 30 frames per second?
Yeah, they did the 48. They did the double the 24.
Yeah. So I just had never experienced before. So there's a lot of first for me in this movie. So overall, easy to recommend, right? Because even if you have like a friend or a family member that just like doesn't care about movies, right, and they're just looking for something to turn their brain off, all they watch is the Kardashians, right? You have like the perfect sample person that just does not care about what they're watching. They just want to be visually entertained. Like, yeah, bring them along. They're gonna have a great time. And I think even if you have like a super film snob friend, they're gonna have a great time too, because they can appreciate the visuals. And this is just, it's very easy to recommend. I'm very excited for more Avatar in the future. So, Chris, what did you think about Avatar?
I lean into visuals does not a good film make. At the end of the day, I think it's beautiful. They've worked on this movie for 5 years. I think, I don't say it's the best movie we've ever seen, like visually, but like I do, it's up there. I can't disagree. At no point did I think, oh my gosh, I'm watching someone be mocapped, right? Like, this is, when you mentioned Avengers, I'm like, it's similar to like Thanos, right? In the Avengers movie, you never once think, oh, that's Josh Brolin wearing a Thanos thing on his head, like with the dots. Like, everything looks absolutely fabulous. Even the water stuff, which I know you're not a big fan of underwater scenes, right? We've talked about that in some other movies. So I'm excited to get your opinion on those, because a lot of this movie is set in water, underwater, for this whole thing. I think honestly it was fun to be there, to experience a very large screen in the cinema. The audio sounds like you're supposed to. Just being in I I wouldn't say communal, but like you're watching a movie with everybody else, and you're just kind of letting it wash over you, pun intended, I guess, with The Way of Water, and experience it. I think that, again, I think I agree with you. The story is a little light in things, but I think if I was to do anything I would just say, if you don't want to watch this whole movie, go to the last hour, right? There is very much, this movie is split in like 3 sections. the last section involves essentially the conflict of the movie, and I'm pretty sure it's just one big scene, right? Like it just starts and doesn't stop for like the last hour, and that is absolutely phenomenal to see on here. And it really, brings part of, like you mentioned, the Pandora, the world of Pandora, the different, the natives, the Na'vi, the jungle ones, the water ones, the RDA, everything kind of culminates in this last hour long piece here, this 3-hour movie. And it was really, I can't say, I'm not being harsh on this movie. I just don't think I'm not gonna put it on a pedestal, but I really enjoyed watching it. And I honestly, and I think you may, I don't know if you agree or not, this is better. I would hold this above the first one, right, in terms of like sequels doing better than the original. So James Cameron is known to do that with both of his Terminator movies, right? Everyone likes Terminator 2 more than like the Terminator's good, but everyone loves Terminator 2. Avatar, good. A lot of people are liking Avatar: The Way of Water a little better. So and I think, to me, it's just because I feel the overall, there's a lot more characters to be invested in here, right? It is truly a sequel in terms of, like, Vin Diesel should have been in this movie because it's all about family. I think you might have mentioned that yesterday. So, like, it's all about family. The characters here, it's not, you're not being introduced to the Na'vi and their culture. You're being introduced to, I guess, another set of Na'vi and their culture, but from the point of the Na'vi rather than the humans in, like, trying to become part of the Na'vi to steal their unobtainium, if you will. And this movie dives into another, I guess, MacGuffin, if you will, that people want to get, and it affects the water Na'vi in that regards. But overall, I mean, there are, like I said, at no point did I ever question any of the CGI or any of the effects, or say, hey, this is just a person mocapping this scene. It all felt real. I don't know. I've got, again, I know you've got, do you have IMDb or Wikipedia pulled up for this movie, Mike? Because I'm pulling up Sam Worthington. When was his last movie? I'm looking here. He's got some that he's done here or there, but, like, I can't think of a movie he's done since, I guess, Wrath of the Titans. He did back right after kind of Avatar.
Think about it this way. If he was lucky enough to participate in the box office of the first Avatar in any significant way,
right? Well,
he does not need to look for another thing to do.
Well, but he was in everything for like 4 years, and I was like, okay, that's great. And then he does nothing, but, like, at the same time, it's not like an actor like, oh, he was rusty or he sucked. Like, he did a really good job in this one as well, playing Jake Sully or whatever I can't say whatever his nickname is of he's like the warrior of the Na'vi who beat the RDA the first time. So
who the chief or whatever, I don't know what the name is.
Yeah, well, he's got like a special name. So anyway, yeah, I think you're probably a little more hotter than I am. I'm not cold by any means. But I do want to talk a little bit about the like I said, what we have the two parts, right? The visuals, the things that we experience while watching it, and then the story in itself. So which one do you want to jump into first? Because I honestly think there's no spoilers for this movie. Like, nothing about this I feel is spoiled other than, like, certain like telling what scenes are. But I'm going to mark the spoilers right now.
Well, I feel like I'm geared up a little bit on the story elements right now, so let's jump into the story overall for this movie. Jump on the spoilers right now, warning everybody. When I was watching this film, to me it felt like I was watching 3 episodes of, like, the best-looking HBO show of all time, so, like, 60-minute episodes in a row, to the point where I got so engrossed so early on in the movie of the clone version of the bad guy from the first movie coming back, and he's hunting down Jake Sully, and they're still in the forests, right? And we're being introduced to the kids, and how some humans are still left behind, and how there's the spider kid running around. I honestly,
his name's Spider, by the way. He's not an actual spider person, but yeah.
There was a brief moment in the movie where I forgot, like, oh yeah, they're supposed to go to the beach at some point in time, right?
Yeah.
I totally forgot, and then that's kind of where I felt like, oh, the first episode of this 3-part miniseries, right, is just them, like, setting everything up, right? It's the stakes of the villain coming back, Sigourney Weaver's immaculate clone conception being part of the family, just getting everything in line, what's happened between the first movie and this movie, and then all of a sudden the humans coming back. It was a little jarring, right? I kind of thought maybe we'd get a little bit more of the human side of things, right? Like I'm hoping at some point in time in one of these 5 movies we get to visit Earth.
So
maybe not for like a whole like portion, but I just want to see what Earth looks like. Right?
One of the producers, I think John Landau, says like I think in movie 4 or 5 they even have Neytiri going to Earth, like a whole like taking some of the people to Earth for that. So yes,
maybe kidnapped or something like that. Because I want to see a little bit more, because I totally understand the motivation of these humans, and if this movie is doing anything right on the line perfectly, is I would 100% believe this is what the human race would do if we found another planet, right? We would absolutely do everything that these bad guys are doing in this movie. We would show up, we would do the same playbook that colonizers have been doing on Earth, for like the last 1,000 years or whatever. So it felt very believable. This is how it would go down. And even when you see the very intense kind of wailing scene in the movie, it just seems like so like James Cameron knows what he's talking about, right? He was like, I am obsessed with the ocean and diving deep. So even when he does these moments and set pieces, like I'm just like looking at the bridge, I'm looking at railings on this boat, and I'm just like, oh, James Cameron knows exactly what the railing of a boat looks like. He knows theoretically how you would hunt this alien whale on an alien planet. It's like, it's so meticulous and like well crafted. It's so fascinating to watch.
It felt more like an actual educational segment than part of a movie, right? Like you're not watching it. It is of course an action piece when they're doing the whaling, but it felt more educational because also he has a character played by Jermaine Clement, right? Like telling us what's going on, like explaining to Spider, like the human part of this while it's going on. So 100%, he is very, everything underwater was very thought through and done well, right? Very much from the start to the end. I will say in terms of story parts, there to me there are 3 parts with a prologue. The first 20 minutes or so, I was like, I almost walked out of the movie because I'm like, this is the stupidest prologue I've ever seen to a movie, right? Like, hey, I'm Jake Sully and this is my life. We've had these number of kids in this number of time. And, it just kept jumping through things very quickly. I'm like, this is way too fast for a movie to be moving that's this long. Like, I hope the whole movie isn't just like small 4-minute segments that are just like, then we time jump and then we time jump. Like, when the humans came back, right? They're like after what was it, 15 years or something, they came back. However, the oldest son is, they came back and like it lands and it burns a huge crater in the ground. And I'm like, this isn't what I wanted to see with the humans coming back. This kind of sucks. Like this, it's not very fun. You're right. Like, but by the time the prologue got done, I was able to get more into this movie. Right. Like once they go and like, hey, we're doing guerrilla tactics against this. Oh, we know they're hunting for Jake. He's gonna leave and just go out into the wild or whatever, and find and forge a new area, just live under the radar. That's I think when the movie really kind of picks up for me. That
would be, I guess, theoretically, for going along this episode way, that would be episode 2, right? When they finally make it to the beach.
I would say, I say 1, maybe the first part's a pilot, and this is like really where I would say that's where episode 1 is them merging or like acclimating to the water tribe. Episode 2 is the human Spider with his recom like father, who's like his memories have been implanted in a Na'vi, right? Like warrior. And then 3 is the final scene, or like the big battle at the end.
Yeah. Well, either way you like to slice it. I just think it's really fascinating because I've never seen like a deep dive study on like a fictional planet before, right? Because I would say that the biggest example that we have of going to other planets is probably Star Wars, right? We have a whole lot of narrative and story out there of visiting other planets, but as everybody knows when it comes to Star Wars, all of these planets just end up being a facsimile of a location, right? You know, you land on Endor, it's a forest planet. You land on Hoth, it's just an ice planet.
Defined by one geographical look, and that's really it.
And it doesn't matter what side of the planet you're on, and the logistics of length of around a planet is never brought up, because theoretically these starships can just go out into orbit and go around, right? But in this movie, I thought it was really fascinating, because I was like, oh, his family's on the run, and I really felt like they were doing a good job hiding. They rode on those Banshees for what seemed like days, and when they finally landed there, it was just like, oh, this is really cool. We're really seeing a different slice of Pandora. We're seeing a different ecosystem, and I also loved how they were visually evolved differently. They were evolved and ready to go for water, and I love how when they were getting roasted for having like thin arms and like weird like little tails. I was like, oh, I never realized that these that our main characters were just really suitable and adapted to the forest. And then we're seeing these other, and then as soon as I saw that, I was like on board. I was like, all right, give me more Na'vi. I want to see sand Na'vi. I want to see mountain Na'vi. I saw a headline just yesterday that said that they might want to explore like a fire tribe for the Na'vi moving forward. So I want to see what that looks like. So I'm all on board to explore this planet for multiple movies. I want to see all of these different types of Na'vi, because I think that's fascinating, and that really helped propel the story, right? Because that's what we were doing in the first film. We were following Jake Sully adapting to the Na'vi and seeing their culture and understanding how it all works, and we kind of get to do that all over again. And it would seem like a risk, right? You know, do you want to retread the same type of story? But I would say they did it, and it was entertaining all over again, because it was a whole different type of acclamation, right? There was different social structures going on there. So I just thought it was really cool.
And I think the thing is also, this movie is not about Jake Sully and Neytiri, right? This is not about them. This is literally the movie about their kids. You know, they have three children. I'm gonna try to say these out here. Let's see here. There's Loak, who's the first, or Netayim is the firstborn. Lok, who is the second son, and then they have a daughter named Took, who's a younger girl. They've also adopted in what I can't think of her name.
Sigourney Weaver's
Kiri. Kiri, yes. Yeah. So Sigourney Weaver plays literally was motion cap for her quote unquote. I guess her avatar had an immaculate conception, and that child is mocap by Sigourney Weaver again, which was really cool that they pulled that through. And then obviously Spider's like their adopted human kid who's kind of raised with them. So but then we meet the Water Tribe kids, right? Like they're the daughter and I guess the sons as well. And really, this movie is about them more than I think anything else. For most, I guess episode 2 here is all about that, and them kind of learning to become part of the Water Tribe, despite a lot of the kids messing with each other for most of the movie.
Yeah, and it was just it was fun seeing them adapt to the way of water. I was like, oh, that's the title of the movie. You said the title of the movie.
They said it twice. They said it at the end too.
Yes, but it was fascinating to see something like that unfold. And also, I love the human technology elements of this, because it's a good reminder that what we're watching is not necessarily a fantasy movie. Even though at times it does feel like that, this has a hard like sci-fi elements in it, right? Like I love like the futuristic whaling ship. What a weird feeling the whaling scene gives you in general, right? Because there's something like sadistic happening here. These humans are hunting down these creatures which have like super high intelligence, and they go out of the way to tell you that these whales are probably smarter than the humans. They have culture, their family. They bring their kids back to show the Water Tribe, and it's like a very emotional feeling. And then they show them just brutally, meticulously hunting one of them down. But you're just so fascinated with it, right? Because as we were saying, they use those like water, those inflated bags to raise the whales. to the surface so they can't get away. They have a tracer on them. The freaking spider robots, the crab robots, those things are so cool. That is like I would say quintessentially the coolest thing, if that could be a defined term, that I've seen on screen this year. They're just so cool looking. Like, I want a Lego of it, but I don't know how Lego releases a kit of something that's created to like kill whales right in this movie. Like, I don't know how it's gonna happen. Like I was saying offline with you when we finished recording the podcast yesterday, I was like, oh, maybe some of the Na'vi can like capture some of these crab robots and repurpose them so I can get a Lego kit for it, because they're so cool the way they move in the water. But I was like, oh, but they're tools of evil and oppression. I can't like them. So like I love the sci-fi elements, like when we got to go briefly into space to see their drop ships and everything. So I love getting that. Like, we get these two awesome sides of this world. We get to see the Na'vi connecting with these very specialized creatures, and then we get to see like these mechanical objects, like the new kind of bodysuits that they have now, to where you don't have to be in these gigantic clunky mechs anymore. It's just kind of more like an exoskeleton that they get to wear. So just visually, there's always something new that you can just get engrossed in. Yeah,
I think I had something, I lost it, but like, you know, when we talk about this movie, I think, you know, in terms of story wise, I think, you know, we mentioned this earlier. I think for Zoe Saldana being one of the biggest characters, she literally takes the biggest back seat in this movie to everybody else. But I'm also really, you know, I applaud James Cameron for bringing back literally every actor from the first movie in some way, with like even the dead ones. He's like, yep, we're bringing them back. Guess what? They're avatars this time. And I'm interested to see where that goes, right? We see Quaritch be saved by his son, who, you know, he saved him, but then like he leaves him, like he's not with him on his side at the end of the movie. But like, you know, he will be back obviously for another movie. Will he go back to the humans? Because, you know, he did, you know, he's kind of going against the humans. Will it be a personal vendetta against Jake Sully? You know, kind of what's that look like? But I did enjoy, you know, Kate Winslet returning to be with James Cameron. She played Ronal, the I guess the queen of the Water Nation, if you didn't know that. And the fun fact, the King Tonawari was played by Cliff Curtis, who was actually in Avatar, the last Airbender movie. He played the Fire Lord in that movie. So in this one, he's the Water Lord, if you will. So yeah, overall, I mean, I'm disappointed that, you know, the main characters, you know, that we know didn't get some screen time, but I enjoyed the kids and everything there. I know what my question was, Mike. You watched the first movie like a day before you watched the second movie.
Correct.
Are these whales in the first movie?
No, they're not. But I believe, if I can remember the terminology correctly, there's like a classification of creatures on this planet that kind of reach almost like legendary Pokemon status. In the first movie, it's that gigantic
orange banshee
that Jake has to tame in order to prove that he's worthy to kind of protect these Na'vi that don't trust him anymore after they feel like they've been double-crossed. So I believe, I'm not 100% sure because it's really hard to keep track of these like new terms. Right, I think these whales kind of fall underneath maybe that classification. Like, not all of them, but I felt like there was a bigger one compared to all the other ones. So I think that's kind of what happens. So they become so mythical.
So here's what so I wrote Avatar's Flight of Passage the 2 days after watching this movie, right, at Disney World. In there, you go through the whole you're standing in line, you go through like some abandoned RDA stuff. You get to see a recom in a tank, all this other fun stuff. When you ride the ride, though, have you been on the Flight of Passage before?
No, they don't have one out here in California.
So this ride was open in 2017. In it, there is a water tribe and those big whales in it already. So they've had those designed for, you know, just as long as they've been working on this movie. So I thought that was very interesting I've ridden this before and I didn't know, I would never have noticed it, but I was able to ride it and see them. I'm like, oh, my wife asked me, she's like, did they update it for this thing? I'm like, no, this is actually the original one still, the same video. So I could totally see them updating it right for the new movie. But like they are literally, they have the water tribe and the big whales, whatever they're called. out in the ocean while you're flying around,
Yeah.
which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, this would be a great time to go to your local library and see if they have the visual dictionary of any of the first movie or the second movie. I saw that there is one for sale. And I think I would love to flip through that just to get a little bit more familiar. But just to kind of I guess, wrap up the story in general, I think there's a lot of balls still left in the air that I'm looking forward to seeing how they wrap up. Even though Neytiri was a little bit of a backseat in this movie, she had, I think, one of the most interesting, compelling moments in the entire movie between her and Spider, which I just thought was amazing because Spider has never been around the Na'vi in like times of peril, right? You know, the kid was born, after the humans were expelled or too young to remember, and just grew up in times of peace and never kind of saw these Na'vi as a threat. He just saw them as family. And then when he's on the boat and kind of hiding behind this little pillar, he kind of sees Neytiri go a little savage, like killing some of these humans that have kidnapped her daughters, and he's like terrified to come out from around this pillar, because like he feels like if he was to turn around, even though like she has like gone feral in his eyes, and he's terrified. And I was like, oh, this is an interesting reminder for him that he is different. It doesn't matter how much he is spending time with them. He's never going to be quite the same. And then when she uses him for leverage, I mean, like, wow, what a betrayal to just like, you've dedicated your entire life and now you've just been used as a pawn. So I thought that was a really powerful moment. And I was just like, okay, James Cameron does know how to do something like really, just like, really intricate to the story, these like little moments that are huge, these character moments that you would think wouldn't appear in this big movie. So I think overall, actually, the more I talk about this movie, the more I think I'm up and positive on the story than I was before. So I think there's just a lot to digest, and I think it's in a good way. Yeah,
well, I think we've talked about every episodes 2 and 3, but like again, the whole movie's about children, right? The children of Jake, Neytiri, and obviously Quaritch as well, which we didn't expect because I didn't know he had a kid in the first one. Did they say that in the first movie? I don't think they did.
No. I mean, but you could imagine it. I mean, people get down and dirty at military bases far from home. Well, I'm not saying it's out there, but like as like hardcore military as he was in that, right? Like I wouldn't. They didn't really touch on it, but like anyway. But I think, before we jump out of the story portion here, this last scene, the last part of this movie, the last hour where the boat comes, they've tagged the whale that the middle son has become, I guess, a partner with, right? That's where this movie like really just kicks into gear, right? Like we get to see we get to see the Jake, Neytiri, we get to see the kids fighting, we get to see hiding underwater. This is where like more of the crab, tanks come out. The ship's exploding, it's capsizing. He's doing Titanic all over again, but in sci-fi mode. There's a lot of really cool stuff in this, and the whole scene at the end. The only thing I don't believe in, or I had the hardest time believing, is like all these. Like I thought more people would drown in this movie, the way they painted, but then it seemed like, well, they're not going to drown anybody, right? I think they only killed the one son at the end of the day. Like the oldest son dies. But like, everybody else is, nobody, I don't think anybody drowns, right? Like everybody makes it out. I mean, yeah, it was an impactful death. I was not expecting them to kill off like one of the sons. I mean, it just really goes to show you that nobody's safe in these movies, which I thought was good because we don't get a lot of that in our big franchise movies sometimes. And plus a kid too, to kill off a kid.
And they
like,
tell,
I mean, I know they're like an older teen, but like still, like that's intense. So
yeah. And they telegraph it like early on, right, with like the fake out of like when they're on the banshees, like doing watch out on some of those runs. But like it was like something like literally nobody's safe in this movie, in the next movie, or in the next 3 movies. Like they don't need people to be alive, or they don't need, or if they die, they can literally find ways to bring them back as well. So it's gonna be surprising, I think, going forward for the story. I think it ends at a great spot, right? They've been accepted by the water people. They're gonna fight off more humans. I'm interested to see where the humans go after this, right? The RDA. Will Quaritch go back to them? Will they attack the water people? Or will they go after, like you mentioned, another quote-unquote tribe, and they all have to go save another tribe, right? Like maybe they're attacking the fire tribe, now they have to go find the fire tribe and help them.
Yeah. My theory is that Jake is going to do a tour around Pandora to try to unite all of the tribes and convince them that nothing's going to stop these humans. And the big tonal shift we got from the humans in this movie is that Earth is destroyed. It's depleted. There's nothing left there. They need a new home. That is the orders kind of for the military branch that's here on this planet. In the first movie, it was more like a strip mine operation. Let's just get what we can from this planet and get back to Earth and use this unobtainium and get rich. Now it's more like, oh, Pandora is our only hope. And I feel like in the next movie or them moving forward, it's going to be the last ship arriving, right? The big fleet that's going to arrive is going to be like, this is it. This is all of our humans. There's no more left. There's no more coming. Earth is destroyed. So it's going to be more like we're here permanently. It's either us or you. There's an all-out fight. There's no more running them off the planet because there's nowhere else for them to go is going to be my guess.
Well, that's going to go against your idea of them going back to Earth then, because if there's
I mean, Earth is still there. It didn't get exploded by the Death Star, but like
I don't think the
it's
next
a
one's
slow phase out. It's a slow phase out process, right? You move to a new office. You still got the lease on the old one. It's really shitty, but you still left some stuff there. You know.
I don't think they'll all do that. I think the other thing they're gonna have to do, the Na'vi are going to have to get, I guess, maybe technical is my theory. Like they have to progress their culture a little farther forward. Because they're getting beat down by like all the technology, right? And they can't go to space to stop them from coming into the atmosphere. So I think they're going to have to commandeer a lot of human tech and start fighting back in that regard. But I don't know how they're going to do that to get them, I guess, like you mentioned, out of like the savagery and into like maybe the Middle Ages a little bit more, like the Steel era. So
man, there is so much more to this movie than I thought before I started talking about it with you. There are so many little things I could bring up. Like, right, we could talk about them looting these different types of trains, the brief shot that we have of this new city that's being built on the planet from the humans that's way bigger than the little outpost that they had from the first movie. There's so many new things that we could bring up, but like I think that the best thing that I could suggest is that you subscribe to our normal weekly news podcast, and I'm sure over the weeks we'll talk more and more about story elements as we get rumors of what's going to be coming in these next movies. But I think now we gotta talk about the technologic side of this thing. It is just an absolute wonder, and there is not a single bad thing I think I could say from the technical side of the filmmaking of this movie, except maybe trying to get used to this possibility of introducing variable frame rates.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Into my narrative, I don't know how I feel about it yet.
So to me, and this is something we talk about. The idea of resourcing like Pandora, right? Humans and Na'vi. I mentioned, what if we did like a Civilization or like a World of Warcraft style game with the Na'vi and the humans? Like that would be a fantastic goddamn video game. Top down RTS style. But at the same time, there were a lot of scenes in this movie, and I told you this yesterday, where it felt like, the frame rate's ramped up. I'm about to go from like wide camera angle to over the shoulder of one of these characters, and I have to control them around the world a little bit, because the variable frame matches kind of like that higher 60 frames per second that they do in video games. But as you mentioned, it's not consistent, right? The whole movie isn't one frame rate. They ramp it up during action scenes or other things to highlight different areas of the scenes, or like to make you feel a certain way while you're watching it.
But also, I would say it's almost more loosey-goosey than that, in a way of like, the best analog I could think of, like if you remember watching Nolan Batman movies back in the day on the IMAX screen, whenever the big action set piece would happen, right, you would see the aspect ratio of the screen change, and you go, oh, this was the portion of the film that was filmed in IMAX. I see that the aspect ratio has changed. Let's settle in for this action scene, right? But in this movie, I felt like the frame rate was kind of all over the place. Like sometimes I'd be in an action scene and it'd be a high frame rate, and sometimes it would just be in the interior of like a science lab, and they would just be kind of like jumping around tables, and they would just be having like a conversation, and the frame rate would be higher. So like it almost felt like I was like being eased in and out of these different frame rates, and I was like, what is happening? I felt like I was distracted by just trying to figure out what was happening here. And my only assumption is that like Cameron comes at it from an angle of like, whenever we're just doing kind of like over the shoulder, just dialogue scenes from going like shot, reverse shot, we're just going to stick to the normal filmic, frame rate that we're used to. But whenever we're seeing like dynamic motion, whether it's an action scene or just a character interesting going from one end of the room to the other, I'm going to crank up the frame rate. And I wonder if it's going from 24 frames a second and then like up to 60, or is it like sometimes at 24, then it goes to 30, maybe 48, and then 60? Like, is there like a range that he's fluctuating through?
So it's not James. Well, it is James Cameron, but there's a company called Pixelworks which did this. They did all the actual framing, like the frame rates of this. So there are 24 and 48. But they literally do it on a shot-by-shot basis. Like, they don't highlight an area and say, this scene, in the lab is going to be 48. The next scene's 24. They were doing it, like, literally almost shot-by-shot in the movie, 24, 48, based on what they felt was the cinematic appeal for the film.
And I guess you could do that if you film your entire film at a high frame rate, similar to how if you film your entire film at like a high resolution, like 8K cameras, right? Yeah. You can crop and adjust any scene that you want. So yeah, I guess I almost like imagine like a slider, right? Like somebody's watching the movie, like, oh, this is intense. Let's increase the frame rate. Oh, let's bring it back down. Yeah. Let's bring it up. Let's bring it down. And it feels very fluid. Like I feel like I just can't see the lines always.
Yeah, and frame rate does go along. Again, one thing I've ever learned about frame rate is when you do your audio, it has to match your frame rate. So they have to record it at one way and then make sure it samples downwards in the proper way. But like the only scene I can remember the most that had the high frame rate was like when the boat hits a rock and this person literally went flying out of it, like he was doing a cartwheel. I could see everything, every frame he did in like full 48 frames as this body was like being hurtled into the ocean for this scene. I know there were more, but like that's one that sticks out to me because I'm like, whoa, that looks like a video game cutscene. So it was kind of fun to see it. I don't think every movie needs this, right? I think this movie, knowing that we're watching a technical, we know we're watching a technical marvel. It's not like a guesswork. It's not unveiling itself to us as we watch. We know what we were getting into going into this. But it's interesting to know they've played a little bit more with this. Not a consistent frame rate, but the variable frame rate, like you mentioned. Like The Hobbit takes a little bit to get it. Like I watched the first one in 48, and it took a minute to get used to, right? Because all the trailers were at 24, and then the movie was at 48, and you're like, I feel motion sick. I feel really motion sick, and I think you mentioned your wife got motion sick as well for some of it because, she's like me. We get motion sick pretty easy.
I mean, and I would say it was an effective scene though, because it was when they were in that zero gravity kind of like birthing pod in orbit, and the camera's going all over. She was like, "Whoa!" I mean, I could feel it a little bit, but I'm not that motion sickness, but it was happening for sure on her end, which I was just like, "Well, this is effective." I mean, I suppose you would be a little disoriented if you were up there in space, so I do feel like I'm in a unique place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't like I said, I don't think we need to see, the next Quentin Tarantino movie in variable frame rate, but like, watching something like this is definitely it was fun. It was fun to see it. Now, some of the other things I was gonna, we talked about, one of the scenes you mentioned in the trailer early on was where the person's hand is in the water. They did I don't know if you saw, they did uncover how they did that.
Oh my gosh, that scene has been analyzed like 6 ways to Sunday out there on the internet. Yeah, there is a physical prop out there, but
they did it in the water and then they overlaid everything on top of it.
Yeah, but who knows? I mean, I don't think we're ever going to really know where CG starts and practical ends in this movie, right? Are we talking like, the new CG Lion King where it pretty much is entirely an animated movie? How much is this actual real physical? Because all of this is like mocapped, right? So this is in a sound stage where we're getting a lot of the mocap data. Yeah. I'm sure there's parts of it, but if I had to guess, I would guess the majority of this movie, which means over 50% of the pixels on the screen, are computer generated.
Well, they've been touched. I'd say a lot of it has been touched because one thing, there was a video this weekend I watched, behind the scenes that showed like they were in the water for that, right? Like they have physical props, but like the backgrounds like obviously aren't real. But a lot of the actors, they wore fake dreadlocks for their scenes. Like they like bright colored like dreads on their hair, so they could feel how their hair was reacting and react to that like in the movie, right? Because that's one thing. Like sometimes you don't think about the weight of hair, especially because everyone in this has awful dreadlocks. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that for this, but like they actually made the actors wore that on top of their mocap suits, like those dreadlocks, so they could see how the hair reacted to their body moving. One of the things I thought was cool about the Na'vi is like again their ears, like the way the ears move more than like when they're talking, and you can see the emotion not just off their body but like how their ears move, right? Like when they're angry or like perked up. I thought it was really like small details like that really go a long way.
Just speaking of the Na'vi in general, I was totally in disbelief that these like weren't real creatures, right? I just felt like if I walked out of the movie theater, I could just see like a 10-foot Na'vi just out in the lobby, and I would be like, "Oh yeah, this makes sense. I just saw the movie that you were cast in, right?" It's just so believable. I mean, the fidelity and the resolution of the pores on the skin, it was just so lifelike. The animations, and that's really what sells it too, like the motion capture. And I'm sure that there's fine-tuning animation from animators as well. Like it just all felt so real. Like I felt like I was on an alien planet. It was just absolutely fascinating. I've just never seen visually a movie go so hard, right?
I would say my biggest ding against this movie is going to be a creative decision, and that is knowing that we have Sigourney Weaver play a young actress and use her voice as well. Hearing Sigourney Weaver's voice, knowing it's her, knowing her age, and then seeing her play a young Kiri, to me broke me a little bit. Like not enough to ruin the movie, but like I feel like they could have touched that maybe a little bit more.
I could feel like I feel like you could feel the modulation, right?
Yeah.
Like Sigourney Weaver has a very identifiable voice, especially if you just rewatched the very first Avatar movie. You're very familiar with what she sounds like,
and she's in this with her voice too. The scenes though.
Yeah, and then obviously, I'm sure they tried to just plug her voice as it is onto this younger character, and they're like, "Oh, it's not working. We tried it. We didn't think it was going to work. So now let's like modulate it a little bit." And just sometimes it felt like I was hearing Sigourney Weaver coming out of this character. Sometimes I felt like I was hearing the computer version come out of this character. So I would agree. It was a little jarring of just like, what's happening?
I love the idea of using Sigourney Weaver to play a younger version of herself, right? This immaculate conception person who has this connection with is it Awa, I believe is their god of this planet, and like this obviously she's obviously supposed to be like Pandora Jesus is how this is going to play out later, right? Like she's got some extra spiritual connection, but like I think that's great coming from Sigourney Weaver who had that connection in her avatar body, but like the voice was just again, it's not enough to like. I have to nitpick to find this, right? But like that was like the only thing I was like, not the best thing, but like everything else really. Again, the actors, everything really brought me into it. I didn't see as much Stephen Lang in the Quaritch Recom as I thought I would, but he still did a great job. Like Stephen Lang's just got that menacing military voice to him. You just hear that prick in his voice, and I like it. I didn't see as much in him, and that's not a complaint. I'm glad they didn't make him like one for one from like his military version, right? And give him like we gave you the same scar your other person had, so you remember the scars you had. But yeah, I think it was a good time. I mean, I like visually, like all the avatars. I also forgot the one thing I didn't get in my recap video. I forgot the 5 and 4 finger thing, or the 5 and 6 finger thing. Did that play a big role in the first one, or was that just a?
No, not really, because no one was really going 100% undercover in the first movie. The Na'vi knew that the humans were there. They knew Jake Sully was kind of like this hybrid, but believed that he truly wanted to learn and adapt, so they let him be a part of the Na'vi. Almost you could say there's a theme going here where James Cameron wants you to know that like the Na'vi are just better it's just a better society, right, than the human race, right, where you can be a hybrid, you can be like a mutant or like a quote or a freak or whatever, and yeah, teenagers will still bully you because teenagers are the same across the galaxy. They will always be mean no matter what. But the adults were just like, no, you need help. You're a part of this planet. We're here to help you. Open arms. Even when like the threat of bringing the war to them was very apparent, they were just like, no, we're here to help you. Like even though this is a lot of strife, you know, we are all one. We are all part of this planet, and I think that's really strong. And that's going to be the X factor, you know, that helps them defeat the humans at the end of the day. It's kind of like that tried and true story that you hear in every movie of just like, we're going to defeat you because we have friendship, but it's going to be, we're going to defeat you because my telekinetic adopted daughter can control the vines across the planet, and it's going to use these huge tree trunks to like whip your, you know, helicopters out of the sky in the fifth movie.
That's, I think, you know, I don't know, I'm gonna pull this up real fast. So like the I really enjoy all the creatures in this, right? The designs and things, like they're alien, but they're also familiar, you know, kind of in this world. They're not too crazy kooky that you can't believe that, you know, life could have evolved that way. You know, they just look similar enough in a way. Even like when the water banshees, I don't remember what names they were, when they would glide through the water, their tails would move back and forth as kind of like a fin, even though they were like gliding above the water. And I was like, oh, that's really, really cool. That makes a lot. That is a way that they would traverse, and I could see that happening, like, you know, on our planet as well. Okay.
So everything was just so believable.
So here it is. So in 2018, the titles for Avatar 2, 3, 4, and 5 were leaked. The sequel for Avatar 2, they said, was The Way of Water in 2018. So they got that right? So here is the next 3 movie titles, Mike. All right. And let's see how Avatar the Seed Bearer.
Okay.
Avatar the Tolkien Rider, and Tolkiens are the big water, the big elephants that they were hunting, like sea whales, and then Avatar the Quest for Awa.
Okay. So that's one thing that's interesting, right? Because at the end of this movie, Jake Sully kind of doubles down on this idea that like, oh, we are sea people now. This is our home. We're not going anywhere, audience. We will be here for the next 3 movies, which kind of felt interesting because I still think we're going to get broad. We're going to see more of the planet for sure. Yeah. But it is interesting that like, okay, this is kind of where they're putting down their roots.
If they did the third movie and the third movie was literally the same thing, we got to leave the water nation and go meet the air people or whatever, and you're like, they're just going to do the whole thing again. I think that would be sucked. But knowing that they filmed 2 and 3 back to back, keeping these actors the same age, I think that's a fantastic idea. Because I think if these people aged up, they'd have to keep moving the story forward, right? Like quite a bit. Knowing that the next one is called the Seed Bearer, you know, what visuals, you know, do you think is this going to be more of the like there's big spirit trees, right? They have one underwater here. They have one that was destroyed in the first movie.
Maybe this seed is destined to grow into a big tree that will help protect them from the human invasion, and they got to hunt down the seed. And I don't know why I remember this, but there is like one of the reasons that like forests regrow after they're like burned is that there's a lot of seeds, like I think they're like pine trees. There's seeds that won't open unless they like catch on fire. They need the heat in order to reopen. So if there's rumors that there's going to be fire Avatar in the next one, you know, maybe there could be a little bit of a thematic connection there. But man, I am all on board for this, man. If you flashback, listen to some of our episodes, right? When they were reigniting the Avatar franchise and they were going to be making all these movies. Oh man, I mean, you could say that we're eating crow. I don't know if it's a huge crow feast, but we were just like, who needs more of these movies, Cameron? It's been too long. Move on to something else. And it's just like, man, he did it. I'm all in.
Well, the problem I don't think is the movies. The problem is James Cameron's personality, where he's just he sounds egomaniacal in his interviews. He's like, what
I
I'm gonna
agree.
do is like the best thing. It's not him. I don't think his movies I have a problem with. It's him. So I'm like, well, if you just maintain this, and I'll be fine with whatever you put out. Just don't let it go to your head.
I don't really want to get coffee with the guy. He doesn't seem like he's like super chill, right? He seems like he's really hardcore. He's like kind of like the uncle that you see at the holidays, and all he wants to talk about is like, you know, the ocean, right? Like he maneuvers every conversation to the time he went out in a submarine or something like that. It's like, okay, I get it, Uncle James, you're really into this, but I'd love to talk about something else.
The other thing they did mention in an interview this week, the producers and James Cameron, is they don't need to do this every year, right? They've already filmed the third one, but they can work on this visually and story wise for a little bit while. So like,
I would love this to be like an every other year type of thing.
Yeah.
I don't need to do this every year.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking. Like, hopefully, 4 and 5 don't take the 10 years break right after 3 if they're gonna do them. If they do with 3, even better. In with 3, but I know that they filmed the start of 4 with the kids while they were young, and then they're like, okay, well, when you come back, we're gonna age you up. That's fine, but like, I don't want a 10-year wait. Like, let's do every 2 years, and then maybe 3 years for 4 and another 2 for 5. Like, and then get on. What I would like to see, talking about how the world has been built, is, again, you mentioned a visual guide. I would love some individual, maybe some novels, maybe some comic books set in this world, right?
Yeah.
To kind of flesh it out a little bit more. I think there's a lot to be explored. Now, will Cameron license those out? I don't know. I know he's licensed Terminator out, but
Disney Plus is chomping at the bit to get some sort of series out of this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe it's Back on Earth. Maybe it's a prequel in some way. But just to get a weekly Avatar out there, for 8 weeks in a row, that would be huge for them. But yeah, James Cameron seems like a guy that wants to keep this locked down. But I could see that happening. For sure, some sort of offshoot, maybe an anime adaptation of something. Netflix is known to do that a lot.
Yeah, like they could do historical stories on Pandora animated, right, and be cheaper than trying to CGI the avatars for that. The last thing I want to ask for you, I have an idea that Avatar movies are known for being technological advancements, right, for everybody. What is your idea for the next, for Avatar 3? It's got to do something new, right? Not just variable frame rate. What is the next big technological thing do you think Avatar 3 will have, or you would like to see?
Well, heck, he talked about this technology of glasses.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yep.
Well, I don't know how you pull that off. I don't understand the technology of that. I don't know how that works, but if somehow that's a possibility of, I don't know what you do, put a gigantic Nintendo 3DS up on the screen, and you restrict people from sitting on the edges of the aisles. I don't know how that works, but I'd love to see that implemented in some way. But honestly, I would be totally fine if he just kept refining what he had, right? If I got more of this for 3 more movies, I'll keep going back to the IMAX screen. As much as I hated trying to get in and out of those aisles, I'll go back and try to see
get
it
an aisle seat
screen. Yeah, maybe that's the goal, but yeah. Overall, Chris, the more and more we talked about this, the more enthralled I got with it. I think this world is really fun and really creative. There are definitely places to improve on the story, but I can't lie and say I wasn't engrossed every second of this film. So I don't think we can discount that visuals are sometimes can be just as important as the story. James Cameron definitely thinks so, and he kept me busy for over 3 hours. So yeah, surprise, we have a new addition to the Superhero Slate podcast where we love TV, movies, superheroes, and avatars, or Na'vi, or we love Pandora. I don't know if we add that to the top of the show, but I think it's safe to say that this is we're gonna put this in the rotation. When we get new news on Avatar, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, and we kind of always have. The thing I'm looking for here is we do know that there was an Avatar video game announced a couple years ago, and that's the next thing I want to that's the thing I'm looking forward to next. Not just I know Avatar 3 is coming, but I know they're not going to show anything off until 2 or 3 months beforehand. But like I would love to again revisit Pandora in a video game format in that interim. So if we get any information on that, I know there was a game that came out in 2009, but that's not what I'm thinking about. So we'll keep you guys posted. But if there's anything else, Mike, I think that's it. That's our brief. This is only a third of the time it took to watch Avatar, by the way. So I feel pretty confident there. If people want to know what you're up to, what you're doing, where can they find you at, my friend?
Oh, they can find me at Mike Royer Design on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. You can read my webcomics at pickledcomics.com. Chris, if people want to catch up with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Valdan87. I'm going to put my, I talked about my Disney stuff. I didn't get time today, but I'm going to put up the Avatar land Pandora from Disney stuff on there. So I'm going to get that up there. You guys can check out some of that. If people know more about the show, our regularly scheduled episode that we do, where can they find all that good information at?
Yes, we've been doing this solidly for 8+ years now, going into our 9th year. So you can find everything that we've done over at superheroslate.com. That is the best place to find our upcoming releases page. So if you want to see the next movie that we're going to be reviewing, which I believe is Ant-Man Quantumania, you can find that on our upcoming release calendar. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever else you love to listen to find podcasts. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and you can get merch at superheroslate.com/store. We love hearing from you. What did you think of Avatar: The Way of Water? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Do you want to see more of it? Are you excited for the next one? How many more movies do you think they need? Do you think there's enough content there for a streaming show? Let us know. Reach out. And we love our super fans. So if you want to be a super fan of this show, all you got to do is paint yourself blue, share the show with a friend, share the show with a buddy, and we'll be here every week, folks.
That's right. We will see you guys next week.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe.